Right, back to one of our leading stories this afternoon. The International Relations Department has warned South Africans to limit non-essential travel to Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar and Bahrain. The United Arab Emirates has been caught in the crossfire as Iran retaliates for strikes by Israel and the United States this morning. At the same time, the UN Security Council has called an urgent meeting. For more on this, joined now by Dr. Kingsley Makhubela, who will give us some analysis to what is going on. He's a former diplomat. He knows what is going on at this particular time in terms of these diplomatic relations. Is it by design or is it, of course, a coincidence, if you like, that President Donald Trump is putting the Gulf countries against one another, pitting them against one another?
Thabo, good afternoon. No, this is a well-planned operation by the United States and Israel. The mere fact, Thabo, that they conducted the operation on Saturday morning, they of course wanted the market, the stock market, to close in the United States and then commence with the operation, because the fear is the response of the markets to this attack, which the Americans are very sensitive about. But they have no control in terms of when the markets open on Monday, what's going to happen. The only thing they are hoping for is that they would have developed a strategy to calm the market, because that will create a serious revolt within the United States political system if the market was to respond very negatively. And Thabo, there have been views from some analysts that the oil price may go from $80 to $200 per barrel. So that's the biggest fear that the Americans are having. That may create serious problems internally.
Now, Iran and I suppose France, Bahrain and other countries running to the UN Security Council. What do you make of that tactical response, if you like?
You know, the Security Council, it's paralyzed now. There's anger amongst other members of the P5, mainly the Russian Federation and the Chinese, in terms of this operation, because everyone was of the view that the negotiations that are going on very well. We've seen the foreign minister of Oman saying that actually there's been serious compromises in terms of the uranium enrichment by Iran. And it came in the US audience. So I think they've been very concerned. We know that Netanyahu and Trump were hell-bent on conducting this military operation. The issue is, what are the casualties? I've seen President Trump coming out trying to allay fears in the US. And for the very first time, Thabo, a US president indicates that there may be casualties from the United States personnel. You will recall even during the Second World War, when Stalin told Roosevelt, when they were hesitant to open the Western Front, to say you can't get into war without expecting to have any casualties. So this is a conflict that is likely to affect all of us. It's likely to disrupt the logistics, particularly around the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz, the Iranians are going to shut it down, quite honestly. It would affect about 20% of crude oil movement, and it would affect the logistics that moves around that area.
Now, Tehran says, look, we entered these negotiations with the United States, engaged in this diplomatic process, even though we were doubtful about the US and Israel's intention. And we did this in order to demonstrate our commitment to avoiding a war. Would you say now they're going to come back and say, well, we have been proven right, why we doubted these fellas in the first place?
Oh, quite honestly, yeah. They won't say that to say, here we are. We've made serious concession in terms of the uranium. And all of a sudden, the United States decided to go on war. This is going to create a huge public relation problem for the US. Previous wars, Thabo, the US has prepared its own citizens. In this case, we know on Thursday, Marco Rubio had a discussion with a Gang of 8, which is members in the legislature, to tell them about the operation. Yesterday, President Trump had a discussion also to explain his strategy. But at the same time, yesterday, he fired Fred Kutcher, who is the Joint Chiefs of Operation at the Pentagon. So quite clearly, and Kacho was very much opposed to the war. He has given his views from media reports that this war would result in serious casualties and undermining the security of the United States in terms of its military assets in the Middle East. So we've seen the retaliation by Iran targeting some of those countries that are hosting the US military. What we are looking for, what is likely to happen this evening, Thabo, it's intense military attack, assault on Iran, and retaliatory attack by Iran. So tomorrow morning would have a total different ball game. What happened now, I think, was partly the rehearsal of what is likely to come up.
Iran's response is that, well, I mean, we are going to the UN Security Council, but also they're saying the time has come to defend the homeland. Let's talk about that statement, defend the homeland, and its capacity to do that, and what that would imply.
Thabo, going to the Security Council is part of the procedures that any country would do to say we are faced with this invasion. That would help them later on to frame their argument that they were defending themselves. And to do this, to go to the Security Council, it's a procedural issue. It would have no strategic outcome given the veto power that the United States has. In terms of this attack, Thabo, I'm not sure if other allies of the United States in the Security Council, particularly France and the United Kingdom, will not jump on bandwagon to support the US assault on Tehran, because this time around, it seems President Trump has made up his mind that he needs to topple the regime in Tehran. So the regime in Tehran is facing existential threat. So they will do whatever it takes for their own survival. Short of that is capitulation. They are unlikely to capitulate.
I mean, is this likely going to be a prolonged situation similar to what we've seen in the Russia-Ukraine conflict? Or is it going to be the situation of what Trump said the last time when he says we went in and we obliterated their nuclear plant? It was it was as fast as lightning because we've got the technology.
You know, Thabo, there's no way that a regime change will be conducted from air assault. They will need to put boots on the ground at one stage if that is the intention. So they're unlikely to do that. The Americans will need to get permission from the White House. That's one issue. But the Iranians are going to put up a fight. They have capabilities to ward off some of these attacks. They have the capability to come up with offensive attack. So the Iranians, at the end of the day, they're going to tell the Security Council that actually we have been cooperating in terms of this nuclear enrichment material. And here is the attack, which has nothing to do with the nuclear enrichment, given the statement that we've seen yesterday by the foreign minister of Oman. So the Americans are on a back foot in terms of public relations, but do Americans care about public relations at this stage? I don't think they do. I think they're going to insist on carrying on this assault until there's a revolt within the United States, when the casualties are literally inflicted on them. When body bags are starting to arrive back in the United States, you may see a different tune.
Don't care about PR at this particular point. I suppose they also would not care much about the condemnation from non-aligned movements or even other countries and members in the region. By other countries, I'm also talking about South Africa here, which I'm sure they would likely issue a statement and condemn at this particular point. Would that have any form of impact at all?
Statement by political parties, Thabo, the government is mum. You will recall at the beginning of the uprising in Tehran, the president issued out a statement actually urging for peaceful democratic demonstration and urging the Iranian government to exercise some restraint. South Africa was quite oblivious to the fact that those demonstrations were manufactured, as later on confirmed by the Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, that actually they wanted some level of uprising. So information is coming out quite clearly that was a manufactured uprising. So I'm not surprised if the government is still quiet at this time. not issuing out a statement. Political parties had so statement by the EFF and the ANC that are condemning the attack, but where does the government stand on this issue? It's something that we'll need to see.
Dr. Kingsley Makhubela, appreciate your time. Thanks.